1. We're taking a look at a 1985 Mercury Capri with a price tag of $6,500. According to the seller's description, this Capri has been driven for 63,000 miles and comes with a manual transmission. The exterior is a classic red color, while the interior is a subtle gray. It runs on gasoline, and the seller mentions that the vehicle is paid off and comes with a clean title. Now, let's dive into the specifics. The seller states that the motor and transmission are in good condition, which is a positive sign. However, they do mention that the car has a bad fuel pump and they can only start it using starter fluid. This is something to keep in mind, as it may require some repairs or replacements. On the bright side, the seller notes that there is very little rust on the car considering its age. This is particularly important for a vehicle that's nearly 4 decades old, as rust can be a significant problem in older cars. It's worth noting that while the seller claims the vehicle has no significant damage or problems, the issue with the fuel pump suggests otherwise. As a potential buyer, it's crucial to thoroughly inspect the car and consider the cost of repairs before making a decision. Overall, this 1985 Mercury Capri seems to be in decent condition for its age, with a good motor and transmission. However, the fuel pump issue is a concern that should not be overlooked. If you're interested in this classic ride, it's essential to weigh the pros and cons carefully and have a mechanic assess the vehicle before making a purchase. As always, I aim to provide an honest and sincere overview of the cars I feature. While this Capri has its merits, it's important to approach the sale with a clear understanding of its current condition and potential repair needs. 2. We're checking out a 1983 Oldsmobile Regency with an asking price of $8,500. This Regency has been around the block, with 110,210 miles on the odometer. It features an automatic transmission, making it a convenient drive for those who prefer not to shift gears manually. The exterior boasts a custom orange paint job, which is sure to turn heads wherever you go. Unfortunately, the seller hasn't provided information about the interior color. According to the seller's description, the car runs and drives in excellent condition, which is a major plus for a vehicle that's nearly 40 years old. The seller also mentions that they have lots of spare parts included in the sale, which could come in handy for future maintenance or repairs. Interestingly, the seller bought this Oldsmobile Regency as a project car, but decided to pursue a different vehicle instead. This means that while the car is said to be in excellent running condition, there may be some unfinished projects or areas that require attention. It's important to note that the seller is asking $8,500 or best offer, OBO, which suggests that there may be some room for negotiation on the price. However, as with any used car purchase, it's crucial to thoroughly inspect the vehicle and consider factors such as the cost of any necessary repairs or upgrades before making a decision. Based on the information provided, this 1983 Oldsmobile Regency seems to be a solid choice for someone looking for a classic car with a unique paint job and a good running condition. The inclusion of spare parts is a nice bonus, but it's essential to assess their value and usefulness. As always, I strive to provide an honest and sincere overview of the cars I feature. While this Regency appears to be in excellent condition, it's important to approach the sale with a critical eye and gather as much information as possible before making a purchase. 3. We're taking a closer look at a 1973 Cadillac Eldorado convertible with an asking price of $6,000. This vintage beauty has seen its fair share of miles, with 100,000 on the odometer. It comes equipped with an automatic transmission, making it a breeze to cruise around in. The exterior is a classic white color, while the interior features a rich brown hue. Now, let's dive into the details provided by the seller. The good news is that the convertible top is in working order, which is a major plus for those who enjoy open-air driving. However, the seller does mention that while the motor runs well, it could use some work. Specifically, they note that the car is leaking oil, which is a common issue in older vehicles. It's important to acknowledge that the seller openly states they don't have the time to dedicate to this Eldorado. This suggests that the car may require some TLC and repairs to bring it back to its former glory. The seller also mentions that the convertible top could use a good cleaning, which is another factor to consider. On a positive note, the seller is offering 2 sets of wheels with the car. The original wheels come with caps, while the second set consists of 20-inch Rockstars, which could give the Eldorado a more modern and stylish look. The asking price of $6,000 is listed as "or best offer," OBO, indicating that the seller may be open to negotiation. However, it's crucial to factor in the potential costs of repairs and maintenance when considering the total investment. In the spirit of sincerity, it's important to acknowledge that this 1973 Cadillac Eldorado may require some work to address the oil leak and other potential issues. While the convertible top and the inclusion of 2 sets of wheels are appealing features, buyers should approach this purchase with a realistic understanding of the car's condition. As always, I encourage potential buyers to thoroughly inspect the vehicle, request additional information or photos, and consider having a trusted mechanic assess the car before making a decision. While this Eldorado has the potential to be a stunning classic ride, it's essential to weigh the costs and benefits carefully. 4. We're checking out a 1984 Buick Regal with an asking price of $5,300. This Regal has seen its fair share of the road, with 143,456 miles on the odometer. It comes equipped with an automatic transmission, making it an easy drive for those who prefer not to shift gears manually. The exterior and interior both sport a classic brown color, giving it a vintage vibe. According to the seller, the car is in good condition and comes with a clean title. They also mention that the vehicle has no significant damage or problems, which is a positive sign for potential buyers. Now let's dive into the specifics provided by the seller. Under the hood, you'll find a small block Chevy SBC 350 engine with a 4-barrel carburetor and long tube headers. The exhaust system features Flowmaster mufflers, which should give the Regal a nice throaty sound. The transmission is a 204, and the rear end has a limited slip differential with 3.73 gears, which could provide some decent performance. The seller describes this Buick Regal as a usable project, with plenty of issues to keep you busy, but they also state that it is roadworthy. This suggests that while the car may have some quirks or areas that need attention, it's still drivable and functional. It's worth noting that the seller has a bit of an attitude in their description, telling potential buyers not to be brain dead and push the moron button that asks if the car is still available. They also request that interested parties leave a phone number or be ignored. While this approach may be off-putting to some, it's important to focus on the facts about the car itself. In the spirit of sincerity, it's crucial to acknowledge that this 1984 Buick Regal is described as a project car. While it may be roadworthy, it likely has some issues that will need to be addressed by the new owner. It's essential to thoroughly inspect the vehicle, ask for more details about any known problems, and consider the cost of potential repairs or upgrades before making a purchase. Overall, if you're looking for a classic Buick Regal with some performance upgrades and don't mind putting in some work, this car might be worth considering. Just be prepared to deal with a seller who has a bit of a strong personality and approach the sale with a realistic understanding of the car's condition. As always, I encourage potential buyers to exercise caution, gather as much information as possible, and make an informed decision based on their own needs and budget. Let me give you a straight-up honest take on this 1972 Ford Mustang Mach-1 listed at $5,900. Look, we need to be clear here. This isn't a complete car. What you're looking at is essentially a rolling chassis without an engine or transmission. But before you scroll past, there's some really interesting potential here. This is apparently a one-of-one Mach-1 according to the Marti report, which is pretty significant for collectors. It's loaded with desirable factory options: AC, fold-down rear seat, Mach-1 sports interior, that cool rim-blow steering wheel, factory rear spoiler, and a 9-inch Posey rear end. The mileage shows 70,000, but without the original drivetrain, that number is less relevant. The seller is upfront about the car's history. It came to them complete, but with a locked-up motor that had water damage. While they've stripped out the engine and transmission, they're offering 351 Cleveland engines for additional cost if you want to make a package deal. The good news is that the chassis components, rear end, brakes, suspension, and steering are all intact. Plus, you're getting some valuable parts like hooker headers and various engine accessories. At $5,900, you're buying potential here. This isn't a weekend driver. It's a project car that needs significant investment. But given its rare option combination and Mach 1 status, it could be worth the effort for the right buyer who has the resources and vision to bring it back to life. Just remember, go into this with your eyes wide open. You're starting with a shell that needs a complete drivetrain. But for someone looking to do a custom build or restoration, this could be an interesting foundation to work with. 6. We're taking a look at a 1985 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS with an asking price of $7,900. This Monte Carlo has been driven for 83,969 miles, which is relatively low for a car of its age. It comes equipped with an automatic transmission, making it an easy drive for those who prefer not to shift gears manually. The exterior is a sleek black color, while the interior features a rich burgundy hue. According to the seller, the car comes with a clean title, and they state that the vehicle has no significant damage or problems. However, it's important to note that the seller also mentions that the car needs a lot of work. Now, let's dive into the specifics provided by the seller. Under the hood, you'll find the original numbers matching 305 V8 engine, which is a desirable feature for collectors and enthusiasts. The seller states that the car runs and drives, which is a positive sign. However, the seller is upfront about the fact that the Monte Carlo needs to be painted and has some rust. This is a crucial piece of information for potential buyers to consider, as rust can be a significant issue in older vehicles and may require extensive repairs. On a brighter note, the seller mentions that the interior is in very good condition, which is a plus for a car of this age. A well-maintained interior can add value and comfort to the driving experience. In the spirit of sincerity, it's important to acknowledge that this 1985 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS is described as needing a lot of work. While the low mileage, original numbers matching engine, and clean title are appealing features, the need for a paint job and the presence of rust should not be overlooked. Potential buyers should carefully consider the cost and extent of the necessary repairs and factor that into their decision-making process. It's essential to thoroughly inspect the vehicle, ask for more details about the rust and any other known issues, and get a realistic estimate of the costs involved in bringing this Monte Carlo back to its former glory. The asking price of $7,900 may seem attractive for a classic Monte Carlo SS, but it's crucial to weigh that against the potential expenses of painting, rust repair, and any other work that may be required. As always, I encourage potential buyers to exercise caution, gather as much information as possible, and make an informed decision based on their own needs, budget, and willingness to take on a project car. If you're up for the challenge and have the resources to invest in this 1985 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS, it could be a rewarding endeavor. However, if you're looking for a turnkey classic car, this may not be the best choice. 7. We're taking a closer look at a 1978 Chevrolet Corvette with an asking price of $6,000. This C3 Corvette comes with an automatic transmission, making it an easy cruiser for those who prefer not to shift gears manually. The exterior is a striking green color, while the interior features a tan hue that complements the overall look of the car. According to the seller, the vehicle is paid off, which means you won't have to worry about any outstanding loans or liens if you decide to make the purchase. Now, let's dive into the details provided by the seller. They mention that the exterior of the Corvette is in good condition, which is a positive sign for a car that's over 4 decades old. However, they do admit that the interior needs some work, so potential buyers should be prepared to invest some time and money into bringing the inside of the car up to par. Under the hood, the seller states that the engine runs and drives perfectly, which is great news. They've made some upgrades, including a new 650 CFM Performance Holley carburetor and a new aluminum radiator. These additions should help improve the Corvette's performance and cooling capabilities. The seller also mentions that they've installed a new fuel sending unit, which is responsible for accurately measuring the amount of fuel in the tank and relaying that information to the gauge on the dashboard. However, it's important to note that the seller does disclose an issue with the transmission. They state that the transmission doesn't go into reverse, which is apparently a common problem for these cars. The seller suggests that it could be a ground wire causing the issue, but potential buyers should be prepared to address this problem if they decide to purchase the Corvette. In terms of the car's mileage, the seller mentions that it's exempt, which is why the odometer reading is not provided. This is something to keep in mind, as the actual mileage of the vehicle may be unknown. The seller also states that they are negotiable on the price and that they have had the car verbally appraised, so they believe they know its worth. However, as with any used car purchase, it's crucial for potential buyers to do their own research and get an independent assessment of the vehicle's value and condition. In the spirit of sincerity, it's important to acknowledge that while this 1978 Chevrolet Corvette has some appealing features, such as the good exterior condition and the engine upgrades, it does come with some issues that need to be addressed. The interior work and the transmission problem in particular could be significant expenses that buyers should factor into their decision-making process. 8. We're taking a look at a 1984 Chevrolet Monte Carlo, and I want to give you an honest and sincere assessment of this classic ride. First off, let's talk about the price. The seller is asking for $15,000, which is a pretty hefty sum for a car that's almost 40 years old. However, the seller does mention that these cars are becoming more valuable by the day, so it could be a good investment for the right buyer. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller states that the car has a brand new 383-stroker motor that puts out an impressive 450 horsepower. That's a lot of power for a classic car like this, and it's definitely a selling point for anyone who loves performance. The seller also mentions that the car has a turnkey setup, which means it's ready to go as soon as you turn the key. That's always a plus, especially for a car that's been heavily modified like this one. Moving on to the interior, the seller says it's nice inside, but doesn't provide any specific details. Based on the limited information, it's hard to say exactly what condition the interior is in. It could be pristine, or it could have some wear and tear that the seller isn't mentioning. The exterior color is listed as blue, but again, there aren't any photos or additional details provided. It would be nice to know if the paint is original, if there are any rust spots, or if there have been any accidents or damage over the years. One thing to note is that the car has only been driven 300 miles since the new motor was installed. That's not a lot of miles, which could be a good thing if you're looking for a car that hasn't been heavily used. However, it's important to keep in mind that a new motor doesn't necessarily mean the rest of the car is in perfect condition. The seller does mention that they're open to trades, but they're not interested in any junk. That's a pretty subjective term, so it's hard to say what kind of trades they would actually consider. Overall, this 1984 Chevrolet Monte Carlo seems like it could be a great car for the right buyer. The new motor and turnkey setup are definitely appealing, but the lack of detailed information about the interior and exterior condition is a bit concerning. At $15,000, it's not a cheap car by any means, but if it's truly in great shape and has been well maintained, it could be a solid investment for someone who loves classic cars. 9. We're taking a closer look at a 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix, and I want to give you my honest and sincere thoughts about this classic beauty. First things first, let's talk about the price. The seller is asking $13,900 for this vintage ride, which is a fair price for a car of this caliber, especially considering the work that's been done to it. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller mentions that the car has a Pontiac 400 engine, which is a powerful and reliable motor that was commonly used in muscle cars of this era. The engine and transmission have both been rebuilt, which is a huge plus and should give the buyer some peace of mind, knowing that the car has been well maintained. The seller also notes that the car has power windows, AC, and an AM radio, which are all nice features to have in a classic car. However, it's important to note that the AC needs a new compressor, which the seller has provided new in the box. This is something to keep in mind if you're planning on using the car during the hot summer months. Other recent upgrades include a new alternator, brakes, master cylinder, and gas tank, which are all important components that can be costly to replace. It's clear that the seller has put a lot of time and effort into maintaining this car and keeping it in good condition. The exterior color is listed as gold, which is a classic color for a car of this era. The interior color is also gold, which could be a nice match if it's in good condition. However, the seller doesn't provide any photos of the interior, so it's hard to say for sure what kind of shape it's in. One thing to note is that the car has been driven 113,000 miles, which is relatively low for a car that's over 50 years old. This could be a good sign that the car has been well maintained and not driven too hard over the years. Overall, this 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix seems like a solid classic car that's been well maintained and updated with some important components. The rebuilt engine and transmission are definitely a selling point, and the recent upgrades show that the seller has put a lot of care into this car. At $13,900, it's not the cheapest classic car out there, but it's also not the most expensive. If you're in the market for a vintage muscle car that's been well maintained and has some nice features, this could be a great option to consider. 10. We're taking a closer look at a 1969 Chevrolet Impala, and I want to give you my honest and sincere thoughts about this classic beauty. First off, let's talk about the price. The seller is asking $11,000 for this vintage ride, which is a fair price for a car of this caliber, especially considering the low mileage and overall condition. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller mentions that this car is a numbers-matching 327 sedan with less than 20,000 original miles, which is incredibly low for a car that's over 50 years old. This is a huge selling point and should definitely catch the attention of any classic car enthusiast. The interior is described as being in immaculate condition, with a 10/10 rating from the seller. This is impressive for a car of this age and shows that it has been well maintained over the years. The seller also mentions that the car was converted from R12 to R134A AC, which is a common upgrade for classic cars. However, it's important to note that the AC needs to be recharged, which is something to keep in mind if you plan on using the car during the hot summer months. The only modifications done to this vehicle have been aftermarket headers and a carburetor, which are relatively minor changes that shouldn't affect the overall value or performance of the car. The seller notes that everything else is original, which is a huge plus for anyone looking for a true classic car experience. The exterior is described as having original paint that is about an 810, with very minimal wear and a couple of very fine scratches. This is impressive for a car that's over 50 years old and shows that it has been well cared for over the years. The seller does mention that the weather strips could stand to be replaced before long, but they do not currently leak. One thing to note is that the seller is firm on the price and is not interested in any trades. They also mention that the vehicle was recently appraised and insured at $14,000, which is higher than the asking price of $11,000. This could be a good sign that the car is priced fairly and is a good value for the money. Overall, this 1969 Chevrolet Impala seems like an excellent classic car that has been well maintained and cared for over the years. The low mileage, numbers-matching engine, and overall condition of the car are all huge selling points that should definitely catch the attention of any classic car enthusiast. At $11,000, it's not the cheapest classic car out there, but it's also not the most expensive. If you're in the market for a vintage muscle car that's in excellent condition and has some great features, this could be a great option to consider. 11. We're taking a closer look at a 1972 Buick Skylark, and I want to give you my honest and sincere thoughts about this classic ride. First off, let's talk about the price. The seller is asking $7,800 for this vintage car, which seems like a fair price considering the overall condition and the work that may need to be done. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller mentions that this Skylark has a 350 V8 engine and an automatic transmission, which is a common setup for cars of this era. They also note that the car runs and drives, which is always a good sign when you're looking at a classic car. However, it's important to note that the seller does mention some issues with the car. They state that there is some rust present, which is not uncommon for a car that's almost 50 years old. Rust can be a serious issue if left untreated, so it's definitely something to keep in mind if you're considering this car. The seller also mentions that the brakes need some attention, which is another important factor to consider. Brakes are a crucial safety feature, so it's important to make sure they are in good working order before driving the car. The exterior color is listed as yellow, which is a classic color for a car of this era. However, the seller doesn't provide any photos of the interior, so it's hard to say what kind of condition it's in. One thing to note is that the seller states that the vehicle is paid off and has a clean title, which is always a good sign. They also mention that the car has no significant damage or problems, which could be a bit misleading considering the rust and brake issues that were mentioned. Overall, this 1972 Buick Skylark seems like a decent classic car that could be a fun project for someone who enjoys working on cars. The 350 V8 engine and automatic transmission are definitely selling points, and the price seems fair considering the work that may need to be done. However, it's important to keep in mind the rust and brake issues that were mentioned in the ad. These are not minor problems and could end up costing a significant amount of money to fix if left untreated. As always, I recommend doing your due diligence before making a purchase like this. Ask the seller for more photos and information, especially about the extent of the rust and the condition of the brakes. If possible, have a mechanic inspect the car before you buy it to ensure that you know exactly what you're getting into. 12. We're taking a closer look at a 1965 Chevrolet Impala, and I want to give you my honest and sincere thoughts about this classic beauty. First off, let's talk about the price. The seller is asking $14,000 for this vintage ride, which seems like a fair price, considering the overall condition and the extra parts that are included in the sale. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller mentions that this Impala was initially bought for a restoration project, but due to work commitments, they don't have the time to complete it. However, they did purchase lots of new parts needed for the restoration, which are all included in the sale. This is a huge plus for anyone looking to take on a classic car restoration project. The seller also notes that the car comes with an extra hood and trunk lid, which could come in handy if you're planning on doing any body work. They also mention that the car has a strong 283 engine and transmission, which is a common setup for cars of this era. The exterior color is listed as yellow, which is a classic color for a car of this era. However, the seller doesn't provide any photos of the interior, so it's hard to say what kind of condition it's in. One thing to note is that the seller states that the vehicle has no significant damage or problems, which is always a good sign. They also mention that the car has had only 2 owners and comes with a clean title, which could be a good indication that it has been well maintained over the years. Overall, this 1965 Chevrolet Impala seems like a great classic car that could be a fun restoration project for someone who has the time and skills to take it on. The extra parts that are included in the sale are definitely a selling point and could save you a lot of money and time in the long run. However, it's important to keep in mind that this car is not in perfect condition and will require some work to get it back to its former glory. The seller doesn't provide a lot of details about the current condition of the car, so it's important to ask for more information and photos before making a decision. As always, I recommend doing your due diligence before making a purchase like this. Ask the seller for more photos and information, especially about the condition of the engine, transmission, and any other major components. If possible, have a mechanic inspect the car before you buy it to ensure that you know exactly what you're getting into. With a little bit of research and caution, you could end up with a beautiful and unique classic car that will be the envy of everyone on the road. Just be prepared to put in some work to get it there. 13. We're taking a closer look at a 1982 Chevrolet Corvette, and I want to give you my honest and sincere thoughts about this classic sports car. First off, let's talk about the price. The The seller is asking $7,000 for this Corvette, which seems like a fair price considering the work that has been done to the car and the overall condition. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller mentions that this Corvette has had a lot of recent work done, including new brakes, calipers, plugs and wires, a Flowmaster exhaust, and a redone rear end. This is a huge plus for anyone looking for a classic car that has been well maintained and updated with modern parts. The seller also notes that the car has had a tune-up and comes with new tires that have a maximum of 100 miles on them. This is another great selling point, as new tires can be a significant expense when buying a used car. The exterior color is listed as black, which is a classic color for a Corvette. The seller doesn't provide any photos of the interior, so it's hard to say what kind of condition it's in. However, they do mention that the car has glass T-tops, which is a nice feature for a sports car like this. One thing to note is that the seller states that the only work really needing done is cosmetic. This could be a bit concerning, as cosmetic issues can sometimes be a sign of more serious problems lurking beneath the surface. It's important to ask for more details about what kind of cosmetic work is needed and to get a thorough inspection of the car before making a purchase. The car has been driven 119,000 miles, which is relatively high for a classic car like this. However, if the car has been well maintained and has had recent work done, this may not be a major issue. Overall, this 1982 Chevrolet Corvette seems like a decent classic sports car that has had some recent work done to keep it in good running condition. The new brakes, exhaust, and tires are definitely selling points, and the price seems fair considering the work that has been done. However, it's important to keep in mind the cosmetic issues that were mentioned in the ad. These could be minor problems that are easily fixed, or they could be a sign of more serious issues that could end up costing a lot of money to repair. As always, I recommend doing your due diligence before making a purchase like this. Ask the seller for more photos and information, especially about the extent of the cosmetic issues and the overall condition of the car. If possible, have a mechanic inspect the car before you buy it, to ensure that you know exactly what you're getting into. 14. We're taking a closer look at a 1980 Cadillac DeVille, and I want to give you my honest and sincere thoughts about this classic luxury car. First off, let's talk about the price. The seller is asking $6,500 for this DeVille, which seems like a fair price considering the low mileage and overall condition of the car. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller mentions that this DeVille has an original 6.0L motor with only 24,622 miles on it. This is incredibly low mileage for a car that's over 40 years old and is definitely a huge selling point for anyone looking for a classic car that hasn't been driven into the ground. The seller also notes that everything on the car works and that it's highway ready, which is great news for anyone who wants to take this classic beauty out for a spin on the open road. The exterior color is listed as green, which is a classic color for a Cadillac of this era. The interior color is also listed as green, which could be a nice match if it's in good condition. One thing to note is that the seller mentions that the car comes with either stock wheels or 24-inch rims, depending on the buyer's preference. This is a nice option to have, as some buyers may prefer the classic look of the stock wheels, while others may want a more modern look with the larger rims. The car has had only one owner, which is always a good sign when buying a used car. It's also paid off, which means you won't have to worry about any outstanding loans or liens on the vehicle. Overall, this 1980 Cadillac DeVille seems like an excellent classic car that has been well maintained and has incredibly low mileage for its age. The 6.0L motor and highway-ready condition are definitely selling points, and the price seems fair considering the overall condition of the car. However, as with any used car purchase, it's important to do your due diligence before making a decision. Ask the seller for more photos and information about the car, especially about any potential issues or maintenance that may be needed in the near future. If possible, have a mechanic inspect the car before you buy it to ensure that everything is in good working order and that there are no hidden issues that could end up costing you a lot of money down the road. 15. We're taking a closer look at a 1979 Lincoln Continental. and I want to give you my honest and sincere thoughts about this classic luxury car. First off, let's talk about the price. The seller is asking $13,500 for this Continental, which seems a bit high considering the age of the car and the fact that money is still owed on it. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller mentions that this Continental has only been driven 33,000 miles, which is incredibly low mileage for a car that's over 40 years old. This could be a huge selling point for anyone looking for a classic car that hasn't been driven too much. The exterior color is listed as blue, which is a classic color for a Lincoln of this era. The interior color is also listed as blue, which could be a nice match if it's in good condition. However, it's important to note that the seller mentions that money is still owed on this vehicle. This could be a red flag for potential buyers, as it means that there may be some financial issues with the car that need to be resolved before it can be sold. The car has had 3 or more owners, which is not uncommon for a car of this age. However, it's important to ask for more information about the car's history and any potential issues that may have arisen over the years. Overall, this 1979 Lincoln Continental seems like a classic car with some potential, but there are definitely some concerns that need to be addressed before making a purchase. The low mileage is definitely a selling point, but the fact that money is still owed on the car is a bit concerning. It's important to ask the seller for more information about the financial situation with the car and to make sure that any outstanding loans or liens are resolved before making a purchase. It's also important to ask for more photos and information about the overall condition of the car, especially given its age. While the low mileage is a good sign, it's still possible that there may be some issues with the car that need to be addressed. As always, I recommend doing your due diligence before making a purchase like this. Have a mechanic inspect the car before you buy it to ensure that everything is in good working order and that there are no hidden issues that could end up costing you a lot of money down the road. 16. We're taking a closer look at a 1967 Ford Mustang, and I want to give you my honest and sincere thoughts about this classic muscle car. First off, let's talk about the price. The seller is asking $12,000 for this Mustang, which seems like a fair price considering the overall condition of the car and the fact that it comes with extra trim parts. Now, let's dive into the details. The seller mentions that this Mustang is in great condition and has very little rust, which is always a good sign when it comes to classic cars. Rust can be a major issue with older vehicles, so it's important to look for a car that has been well maintained and stored properly. The seller also notes that the car has been sitting for a year, but that it does run. This is important to keep in mind, as a car that has been sitting for a while may need some extra attention and maintenance before it's ready to hit the road again. The exterior color is listed as black, which is a classic color for a Mustang of this era. The seller doesn't provide any photos of the interior, so it's hard to say what kind of condition it's in. One thing to note is that the seller mentions that this car is a project that they never got around to starting. This could be a good opportunity for someone who is looking for a classic car to restore and make their own. The car comes with extra trim parts, which could be a nice bonus for anyone who is looking to do some restoration work on the vehicle. The seller also mentions that they are willing to trade, which could be an option for someone who has another vehicle or item of value that they would be willing to exchange for the Mustang. Overall, this 1967 Ford Mustang seems like a solid classic car that has a lot of potential for someone who is willing to put in some work to restore it to its former glory. The fact that it has very little rust and comes with extra trim parts is definitely a selling point, and the price seems fair considering the overall condition of the car. However, as with any classic car purchase, it's important to do your due diligence before making a decision. Ask the seller for more photos and information about the car, especially about any potential issues or maintenance that may be needed. 17. Let's dive deep into this 1982 Chevrolet El Camino. I found on Facebook Marketplace for $9,500. This unique car-truck hybrid, or Ute as some call it, is showing just 46,985 miles on the odometer, which is impressively low for a 41-year-old vehicle. It's rocking a gray exterior with a black interior and comes with an automatic transmission, making it easy to cruise around in. The seller states it's dependable and comes with current 2024 tags and a clean title, which is definitely a plus. Let me tell you why these El Caminos are special. The 1982 model year was part of the fourth generation, and these vehicles were built on GM's G-Body platform, sharing many components with the Malibu of the same era. They typically came equipped with either a 229Q in 3.8L V6 or a 305Q in 5.0L V8 engine, both paired with that smooth shifting automatic transmission. The El Camino's design perfectly balanced style with utility, featuring that iconic sloping rear window that transitions into the cargo bed. Speaking of the price, $90,500 might raise some eyebrows. But here's the thing, El Caminos have been steadily climbing in value over the past decade. Their unique position in automotive history, being one of the few successful car-based pickups in the American market, makes them increasingly collectible. The low mileage on this particular example definitely adds to its value proposition. What's particularly interesting about this era of El Camino is its blend of classic styling with more modern conveniences. You get power steering, power brakes, and usually air conditioning, making it much more livable as a daily driver compared to earlier classics. The gray exterior color is actually a practical choice, as it tends to show less wear and tear than darker colors from this period. For potential buyers, I'd recommend checking a few key areas. The frame rails for rust, especially if this vehicle spent time in areas where roads are salted. The transmission fluid condition, these TH350 or 200 4R transmissions are generally robust but need maintenance. And the electrical system, which can sometimes be finicky in these G-body vehicles. The El Camino represents a fascinating chapter in American automotive history. A vehicle that could show up at a car show on Saturday, help you move furniture on Sunday, and still be comfortable enough to drive to work on Monday. With this example's low mileage and claimed good running condition, it could be a solid investment for someone looking to get into the classic car market or add to their collection. 18. Let's talk about this 1966 Ford Mustang I found on Facebook Marketplace for $14,900. I've got to be straight with you. This is one of those classic pony cars that deserves our attention, but also needs some honest discussion. This turquoise beauty with its blue interior has covered 75,000 miles over its 57-year life and comes with some interesting pros and cons. Let's start with the good stuff. It's packing the original 289 V8 engine, C-code, which means it's the two-barrel carburetor version making 200 horsepower when new. And the seller mentions it's recently been tuned. Having matching VINs is a huge plus for collectors and authenticity. Being a California car typically means less rust concerns, which is always a big deal with classic Mustangs. Now let's be real about what you're getting into. The seller's honest about the car needing both power steering and disc brakes. These are significant upgrades that you'll want to factor into your budget. The interior needs a little work, according to the seller, so expect to invest some money there too. These aren't deal breakers, but they're important considerations when evaluating the $14,900 asking price. The automatic transmission might disappoint some purists who prefer a manual, but it makes the car more accessible for daily driving. With 3+ previous owners, you'll want to dig deep into its history, though the clean title is reassuring. For perspective, this price point sits in the middle range for 66 Mustangs. Given the needed upgrades and interior work, you might have some negotiating room, as a fully sorted 66 Mustang could run you $20,000 to $30,000 depending on condition and options. I appreciate the seller's transparency about the car's needs. If you're looking for a classic Mustang project that's still drivable while you improve it, this could be your ticket. Just make sure to budget for those needed upgrades. The 289 V8 is one of the most reliable and easily serviceable engines of its era, and parts availability is excellent for these first-generation Mustangs. Remember, folks, when buying any classic car, especially a Mustang of this era, always do a thorough inspection, particularly checking for hidden rust in the torque boxes floor pans, and frame rails. This could be a solid entry into classic car ownership if you're prepared for some work and investment beyond the purchase price. 19. Let's check out this 1967 Chevrolet Malibu listed for $10,900 on Facebook Marketplace. The seller's calling it a Chevelle, which is technically right since the Malibu was part of the Chevelle family. It's showing just 19,150 miles, which seems surprisingly low for a car this age. I definitely want to verify that. What we know is that it's gray, has a manual transmission, which is cool, and comes with a clean title. The seller says it runs and drives, and they believe it's all original. They're looking to sell quickly within 2 weeks to fund their small business. For $10,900, you're looking at what could be a decent classic American muscle car, but there are some question marks here. The seller's vague description and rush to sell means you'll want to inspect this one carefully. These cars typically came with either a straight 6 or various V8 options, but the seller doesn't mention which engine it has. The 67 Malibu is a desirable classic, and if this one's solid, the price isn't bad at all. Just make sure to check for rust, verify the mechanical condition, and maybe bring along someone who knows these cars well before making a decision. Parts are generally easy to find, and these cars are relatively straightforward to work on if you're into DIY. Remember, when buying any classic car, especially one with such a brief description, take your time to inspect everything thoroughly. This could be either a great find or a project car in disguise. Just make sure you know what you're getting into. 20. Let's check out this 1975 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray listed for $15,000 on Facebook Marketplace. This red C3 Corvette with tan interior has covered 63,000 miles and comes with a manual transmission, which is definitely cool for a classic like this. The seller's being honest about the interior being rough, and they're already ordering a new center console to help fix that up. Under the hood, you'll find the classic 350 V8 engine. While 1975 wasn't the most powerful year for Corvettes due to emissions rules, these engines are super reliable and easy to modify if you want more power. Some nice features include the pop-up headlights, T-tops for that open-air feeling, and original rally wheels. Having just 2 previous owners is pretty good for a car that's nearly 50 years old. The original luggage rack is still there too, which adds to its authenticity. The $15,000 asking price is negotiable, and considering the current classic car market, it's not unreasonable, though you'll need to budget for fixing up that interior. These C3 Corvettes are getting more popular, and they make great entry-level classics because parts are easy to find and they're relatively simple to work on. Just make sure to check those T-tops for leaks, inspect the fiberglass body for cracks, and look underneath for any frame rust. This could be a solid buy if you want a classic Corvette you can enjoy while gradually improving it. It's not a perfect show car, but it could be a fun project that you can actually drive and enjoy while you work on it.